Water's World is on tonight.
Can you imagine putting your life on the line and seeing your players, your American players, disrespect the country and the flag on foreign soil?
You're not proud to admit that you've had work done. Why not?
They can't afford for him to succeed with his agenda.
O'Reilly, Meghan, Rush. 3 giant media icons are back and making big headlines. Kayleigh McEnany is here with reaction. And
oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Our nation's bravest disgusted over the NFL's tolerance of the anthem protests. 2 patriots take sides. Plus, what happened?
Oh, what happened? I don't know what happened.
Water's World crashes Hillary Clinton's book signing. It all begins right now. Welcome to Water's World. I'm Jesse Waters. Media malpractice, that is the subject of tonight's Water's Words. Sometimes you don't even have to prove media malpractice. The media does it for you. Here are 2 headlines, both in the Huffington Post, just 2 months apart. Donald Trump prefers his steak well done, a.k.a. the worst possible way. Same publication, new headline. If you judge people for how they like their steak, you might be a Trump supporter. So by their logic, the Huffington Post supports Trump. Then there's Paul Krugman, the liberal economist lionized by the left, supposed to be the smartest man in the room at all times. The New York Times holds him to be the preeminent economic thinker in America. Earlier this year, Krugman said that under Trump, GDP growth won't grow by 3%. But here's the headline that was just released this week. U.S. second quarter growth revised upward to 3.1 annual pace. This is the fastest growth in years. Krugman has a terrible track record, yet he continues to be cited by the liberal media. Just keep that in mind the next time you read the New York Times. Sometimes it's like the media forgets that once you put something on the internet, it stays there. Frank Pallotta at CNN wrote this headline September 20th. NFL ratings are down again this season. Is it time to panic yet? And then 6 days later, Frank Pallotta writes this headline for CNN. Trump says NFL ratings are way down. That's not completely true. Pallotta, you're making a lot of mistakes. Speaking of the NFL, get a look at this headline from the Huffington Post. White athletes still standing for the anthem are standing for white supremacy. What an idiotic thing to say. Now, we invited the writer Jesse Ben on to discuss it. He's a coward, said he wouldn't appear on Water's World. Media malpractice also consists of stories the media does not cover. For example, President Obama, who ran and governed as an anti-Wall Street crusader, has been raking in millions of dollars for speeches on Wall Street. You'd think that would be a pretty big story in the mainstream media. No. The networks completely ignored it. And President Trump unveiled his tax plan this week.
We're here today in Indiana to announce our framework to deliver historic tax relief to the American people.
The tax plan affects every single tax-paying American, but NBC spent 3 times more coverage on Will and Grace promos.
Will and Grace returns Thursday, 9/8 Central on NBC.
You know, Senator Bob Menendez, the Democrat from New Jersey on trial for bribery and corruption, faces up to 15 years in prison. And if convicted, Democrats will lose that seat because Chris Christie gets to appoint a replacement. This could really tip the scales in the Senate. Now, CNN barely covered the Menendez trial. But our buddies at Newsbusters found that back in 2008, Republican Senator Ted Stevens got plenty of attention from CNN for his own corruption trial. In the first 3 weeks of his trial, CNN aired 36 stories about Stevens, compared to only 7 for Menendez in the exact same time period. Both trials threatened to overturn party control of a Senate seat, and the charges against Menendez are actually more severe. So CNN covered the Republican corruption, but covered up the Democratic corruption. And that, my friends, is what I call media malpractice. Joining me now with reaction is former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. So what did you think about that analysis?
I think it was spot on, Jesse. I mean, there is a double standard in this country. It is the reason Donald Trump is president right now, and the mainstream media still doesn't get it. The country doesn't trust them.
Nope.
You know, when they talk about that Donald Trump's ratings are down, the fact is his ratings are right now way up, but there's a bigger issue. Whatever ratings he has, they are 4 to 5 times the ratings of the mainstream media, who right now rank up there with popularity in the American people somewhere between venereal disease and the Zika virus.
It's pretty bad, Governor. Not very good company to share with. I want to get your opinion on something the former First Lady Michelle Obama said, which a lot of people felt was a very unfair attack on women who voted for Donald Trump. Take a listen.
Any woman who voted against Hillary Clinton voted against their own voice. What does it mean for us? That we look at those two candidates as women, and many of us said, that guy, he's better for me. His voice is more true to me. To me, that just says, you don't like your voice. You like the thing you're told to like.
Wow. So I don't know if you could hear that audio very clearly, but she basically said women who voted for Donald Trump voted against their own agenda, and the women who voted for Donald Trump only did so because they were told to by a man, supposedly. Can you believe that?
Here's what I find funny, and I tweeted about this earlier. So let me see if I get this straight. Michelle Obama is now admitting that she did not vote for her own husband in 2008 when he was running against the same woman, Hillary Clinton, because after all, not to vote for Hillary Clinton is to vote against your own voice.
Yeah.
This kind of identity politics, Jesse, if it wasn't so tragic, it would be hilarious. And it just makes her really look so disingenuous to scold every woman who didn't vote for Hillary. And they might not have voted for Hillary because they just didn't trust her. I think it's a terrible thing when you vote for people because of something external. I mean, it would be like saying all the white people got to vote for the white person. Can you imagine the backlash that would have? And it should have, because that's outrageous. If white people hadn't voted for Barack Obama, he wouldn't have been president twice. What if all the evangelicals had voted for me? I might be president. But that's not how America works. America is not all about just saying, I'm going to vote for the person who is just like me. We say we're going to vote for someone we think might lead us well. And that's why Donald Trump is president and Hillary Clinton will never be.
Yeah, she is #1, though, on the New York Times bestseller list. I can only say I think a lot of people didn't vote for Hillary not because she was a woman, because she was crooked. I think that had a lot to do with it. Now, Governor, the president unveiled his tax proposal this week, and I think in general it was good, but there's a lot that I don't like about it. One of those things, he's talking about raising taxes on the very wealthy. Isn't that what President Obama did? What's going on there, Governor?
Well, I hope he recognizes that his promise, his pledge, and frankly, what ought to be, is to lower everybody's taxes.
Agreed.
Now, if he leaves the taxes alone for the top, you know, it's not going to affect their lifestyle. But here's the point. What they need to do in the tax legislation is not give Republicans a way out to vote for serious tax reduction and tax reform. And there is a way legislatively to do that, and that's to vote on this a la carte and vote each tax piece individually rather than putting it in a great big bill, because that is a disaster, and it gives Republicans an excuse to not vote and say, well, out of the 100 things in the bill, I like 99, but this one I can't vote for.
But you know what, Governor? That would be a smart thing to do, and I don't think the people in the Congress right now are doing very smart things. But you know what? Well, we will see. We will see. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Jesse.
Still ahead, Waters World heads to a Hillary Clinton book signing to see what happened. Stay tuned, and we're going to let you know. Plus, an African immigrant shot up a predominantly white church in Tennessee this week. Why is the media hiding the truth about what went down? A startling report up next. On Sunday, Emmanuel Sampson, a 25-year-old immigrant from the African nation of Sudan, strolled into a church with a largely white congregation and started shooting with a .40 caliber handgun, leaving one person dead and 8 others injured. There would have been more bloodshed, but Sampson was confronted by 22-year-old Robert Engel, who heroically neutralized the shooter. The story is eerily similar to the Dylan Roof situation, where a young white man went into an all-black church and opened fire. That story received an enormous amount of media attention, as it should have. Yet this church shooting, with the races reversed, received very little. During the first 3 days after the shooting, the network spent 31 minutes on the anthem protests and just 8 minutes covering this church shooting. Here with his take on it, media reporter for The Hill, Joe Concha. Why do you think they downplayed this so much?
I think because, race may have played a factor in this, as you said. Let's put it this way. The only way you answer that question is if you reverse this situation, right, like you mentioned. If a white man with a mask went into a black church and started shooting. Now, remember, this is the biggest mass shooting, this one in Tennessee, that's occurred on U.S. soil in a church since Dylan Roof.
Yeah, I mean,
right? So
that alone makes it a noteworthy thing to discuss.
Right. So if I go to the New York Times, the paper of record on Monday, what page was that on? Was it on page 1? No. 2? No. 5? No. 10? No.
Really?
You have to go to page 14, Jesse.
Page 14?
Yes, for a mass shooting in a church in order to learn about this. Even if you said, well, the anthem was dominating things, that's fine. But how do you get 14 pages in? And then I went to the press briefing as well.
Yeah.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders on Monday.
Was she asked about this?
She wasn't asked once. And you had to go, 0 questions on it.
Wow, that's shocking.
And you had to go 34 questions in, 34 before there was 1 question on Puerto Rico in the dire circumstances.
Well, I love the media's, crushing Trump for ignoring Puerto Rico, but you don't see it on any of the TV stations. They're not asking about it in the briefings. Also, MSNBC left out the Tennessee shooter's nationality when they discussed this. He is an African immigrant. That's a subject that's in the news as well. Besides the racial angle, you have 2 things, very hot button issues in the discourse being downplayed, I think, for obvious reasons, because they don't want to touch a story like this. It inflames passions. It doesn't fit the narrative. Do you agree with that?
I think we've been numbed by mass shootings, so maybe that has downplayed it a little bit.
Perhaps.
That's one little factor. I think the fact that this gunman was neutralized after someone there with a gun was able to hold him until the authorities came. That part also doesn't play into a narrative. And plus, Jesse, I mean, we know this. We covered this long enough, that the narrative didn't fit the desired script that many media outlets have, and that is to divide the country.
Right.
Now, remember Dylan Roof. It wasn't just the shooting was massively covered, but for weeks afterwards, his life and his background was covered, and it discovered that he had a Confederate flag in his home.
Right.
So what was the result of that? The media attention was so great that Confederate flags were taken out of state houses in Alabama,
that's right,
South Carolina, and on TV land, the Dukes of Hazzard was removed forever because Bo and Luke Duke had a car called the General Lee, and it had the stars and bars on the roof.
That had a huge domino effect. And we haven't really found out a lot about this particular shooter's background. He was obviously very troubled. He had some issues with a girlfriend. There was some really radical Facebook postings, but it's unclear about the racial motivation per se. Maybe is it because this guy didn't have obvious racial animosity as it did appear to have in the Dylan Roof story? Maybe that's why the media isn't covering. Because if you just look at the color scheme of it, most people would cover it on that alone if it was reversed.
I'm sure he knew the church that he was going into and the congregation that it had.
He did.
Right. And the shame of it is there's a mother here that was killed.
Yep.
And she has 2 very young kids, and you barely hear about her. Her name is Michelle Crow, and you don't hear a thing about it. And that just shows you again, Jesse, the misguided priorities of our media today in 2017.
Yeah, and he got her out in the parking lot before he even went inside the church. So she was targeted for a specific reason. We're still trying to find out. Maybe the media could help us find out, do some digging.
There you go.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, Playboy founder Hugh Hefner passed away this week. One of his former girlfriends tells us what life was like inside the Playboy mansion. But up next, Bill O'Reilly, Megyn Kelly, and Rush Limbaugh made a splash this week. We'll break down the latest controversies up next. As many of you know, Megyn Kelly left Fox News last year, and this week debuted her new show at 9 a.m. as part of the NBC Today Show franchise. Megyn continues to make headlines. One of those headlines this week was her interaction with Jane Fonda.
You look amazing. Why did you say, I read that you said you're not proud to admit that you've had work done. Why not?
We really want to talk about that?
Ooh, joining me now to break down some of these is RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany. So, Kayleigh, that look could kill from Jane Fonda. What do you think was going through Megyn's mind when she asked that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me because Megyn asked a very fair question based on something Jane Fonda had said in the past. Not only that, we just heard how complimentary Megyn was to her on her looks, but Jane seemed to be pretty offended by being asked a tough question. But Jane, just to remind you, America was pretty offended when you were over in Vietnam as our men and women were dying on the battlefield. So.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to remind themselves that Jane Fonda is not necessarily the victim. She had quite a sordid history protesting America back in the day. Now, I mean, it's a fair question, I guess. Maybe not the right venue to ask the question. I don't know. You're a woman. Tell me, can you ask that to another woman on live television?
Well, I think the rule here is if Jane Fonda had brought it up herself in the past, it's a fair question. Now, if it was unprovoked, no, but she brought it up in the past. Okay, well, that's good to know in case I ever need to ask anybody about that. Another former Fox News star, Bill O'Reilly, reappeared on the channel sitting down with Sean Hannity to discuss the anthem protests.
Can you imagine putting your life on the line in Afghanistan and having just a leisure time and wanting to watch a football game and seeing your players, your American players, disrespect the country and the flag on foreign soil? Can you imagine how painful that was?
So Bill back at Fox, selling the book, which is doing very well, Killing England, and really put a fine point on the entire controversy, I thought. What did you think about that analysis?
Yeah, that was very well said on Bill O'Reilly's part. Men fought, bled, and died so that these millionaires could kneel on a football field and play a silly little game. And I think a radio host named Joyce Kaufman put it to me best this week. She was on an honor flight, and she said that a veteran walked up to her and said, maybe these men and women will stand for the flag if they're ever handed a folded flag. So for Bill to strike that chord and point out the foreign soil that they were on when they did that, spot on. Yeah, it was nice to see him back making those very, very, very smart analogies. Also this week on Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, who made a very provocative statement about Donald Trump and the establishment.
They can't afford for him to succeed with his agenda. They can't afford it. The lid's blown. The gig is over. The joke is revealed. If an outsider with no prior political experience can come in and fix messes that people have been promised would be fixed for 30 years, how does that make them look? They can't allow that to happen.
Kayleigh, now you're technically part of the establishment since you're a big RNC spokesperson. Do you want to see Donald Trump fail?
No, absolutely not. And I just want to point out those were the two lions of conservatism there having a talk. That was a great segment on Hannity. But I get what Rush Limbaugh's saying. It's frustrating for us sitting here at the RNC when senators do come out and criticize the president. Our chairwoman has said consistently, we've got to stand behind President Trump. There's one person who won a national election. It's President Trump. So everyone else really needs to stand in line behind his agenda because that's the people's agenda.
I totally agree with that. And, I do think there are some people, though, in Washington that do want to see President Trump fail. When you talk about failing to repeal Obamacare, all these leaks, the Russia investigation, it's time for everybody to get on board. Kayleigh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse.
Still ahead, fans burning their tickets and jerseys. We take sides and debate that next. And Waters World winds up at a Hillary Clinton book signing.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Julie Banderas. The mayor of San Juan answering a Twitter attack by President Donald Trump by calling for a united focus on helping the people of Puerto Rico. The island was completely devastated after Hurricane Maria. More than a week later, there was still no power, fuel, food, and water shortage island-wide continues. Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz took to Twitter saying the one goal is saving lives. And while she didn't mention President Trump directly, her tweets came just about an hour after the president accused her and others in Puerto Rico of, quote, poor leadership. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in China this weekend for discussions focused on trade and North Korea. Tillerson is meeting with top officials, including President Xi Jinping. They are also expected to discuss preparations for President Trump's visit this November. I'm Julie Banderas. Now back to Waters World. For all your headlines, log on to foxnews.com.
I think it's a very important thing for the NFL to not allow people to kneel during the playing of our national anthem, to respect our country and to respect our flag.
I think the NFL is in a box. I think they're in a really bad box.
I think they're afraid of their players, you want to know the truth. And I think it's disgraceful.
That was President Trump doubling down on his comments, calling out NFL players for taking a knee or altogether sitting out the national anthem. Outrage is hitting a new high as football fans, including veterans, are canceling their cable subscriptions and even setting fire to team apparel and pricey season tickets.
Oh, say, can you see?
All my Colts jerseys gone. I'm done with the NFL.
I thought about giving away my tickets or selling them. Then I thought, well, those seats are just going to be filled again. So I'm making my own sacrifice.
Joining me now, former NFL safety Jack Brewer. Well, I mean, that's pretty intense to burn your season tickets. Those cost a lot of money. But do you understand the fan outrage, especially among veterans, that are upset with the kneeling during the anthem?
We have to understand both sides. We're Americans, right? We have to lead with empathy. And in this situation, it's just unfortunate. Is this argument about the 6 players who were kneeling 2 weeks ago? Or is this argument about the entire league who basically stood up against a president that called them sons of bitches?
Well, is that why the players kneeled? They were kneeling against Donald Trump?
So let me be clear, because I've talked to several players.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you what they were and what their intentions were.
Okay.
Right? When you look at these players, most of which aren't even kneeling, they're praying.
Okay.
Right? This was a contentious situation.
Right.
This was a difficult, chaotic situation for a lot of these men.
Okay.
Gotta remember, these men are from neighborhoods where they're representing communities, they're representing people.
Sure.
And so we are now as a nation telling them what they're standing for. And I don't think that that's right. Now,
well, no,
if
listen,
you
everybody knows that you stand for the anthem to pay respects to the flag and the service members that died defending the flag.
Mr. Waters, you and I agree on that.
Right.
Right? But not everybody in America sees it the same way. And that's the thing that we need to be talking
about.
about.
Well, how are you not seeing standing for the anthem shows respect for the military, for the people that died?
Of course it does. 100%.
Protecting our freedoms. Isn't that clear?
100%. It's not clear to everybody, clearly.
Why not?
Because some people feel that the national anthem is a time where they want to protest. I don't agree that that's the best situation or the place to do it either.
Right.
But
we can agree on that then.
But, yes, of course we can.
Right.
But I don't want to take away anyone's First Amendment right in this country, because
I don't think anyone's taking away their right. They have a right to do that, but then they also have consequences.
No question, and I think
those actions.
And everyone, and there's a consequence to every action.
Sure.
Right, and we're seeing that. So some people are going to choose not to watch the National Football League. I can tell you right now that the majority of players in the National Football League want to get back to playing football, just like fans want to get back to watching it. They don't want to talk about.
So, do you think that this kneeling situation is going to continue? Or do you think it's going to get dialed back? Because it looks like it's getting dialed back a little bit.
Let's go back. Let me finish.
Sure.
Again, a lot of these men were not kneeling. They were praying. A lot of these men had their backs against the wall. They don't want to be there in that scenario.
Well, that's why it's so confusing, because if you say they're praying and everybody else says they're kneeling, no one knows what they're protesting, what they're doing, and I think that's on them for being so unclear.
Mr. Waters.
Yes.
No, they're not being unclear. They can't.
It's unclear to me.
Yes, it's
I didn't know they were praying.
But I'm telling you they are, because I've spoken to them. But you're not listening to me, and I'm here on your show because I watch your show and I respect you.
No, I'm glad you told me.
Because you have a sound mind, and usually you have a balanced mind. I've seen you go into places where I haven't seen a lot of people that look like you go.
That's
and
true.
I respect you for that, man. But what I'm asking you to do for just on this show, one time, right? Show a little empathy and let's think about, look at the people we're talking about. First off, a lot of these guys are young.
Right.
They're young. They haven't experienced what you and I have experienced because they haven't had the years yet.
True.
Right? They've been paid a lot of money early on. Yes. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt for once and listen to what they're saying. And when you look at that Patriots tape, and my good friend Ray Lewis, right? They're on their knees in prayer, man. These guys, this situation is affecting them.
Yes.
They love the military. You got to remember, think about anytime there's a crisis in this country, anytime we have a war, anything that happens in this country, the National Football League and its players are standing there carrying flags on the field, man. Right. We help rally this country, and we got to figure out a way to change this narrative so we can start bringing folks back together again. Right. Right. And the flag and the anthem is not the time to do it. And I agree with you strongly.
You and I agree with each other on that. And I also agree that police brutality is a major issue in this country.
And
I respect their rights and I respect their feelings about equality and injustice. And I'm on board with all that. I just think the message wasn't communicated properly. But I think now that it's been communicated properly on Waters World.
That's right.
We can maybe move forward and people can come together during the anthem instead of being divided.
Can you help me do that?
Let's do it.
Can you help me do that?
Let's do it.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes.
All right. The parents of fallen soldier Staff Sergeant Louis Bonacasa, who was killed in Afghanistan, confronted director Spike Lee about why he supports NFL players kneeling for the national anthem.
When North Korea aims a nuclear missile at us, are these heroes that you say, NFL, that can't support our flag, are they going to be on their knees when this happens, or are they going to support our veterans?
Sir, I'm worried just as much as Donald Trump as that crazy guy in North Korea. And he has a nuclear code. I'm worried about that.
Unbelievable. Here to respond, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. He's a Fox News contributor and the executive director of the National Center for Policy Analysis. I cannot believe Spike Lee right there. I just can't believe it. They had a veteran up there teeing him up. He had all the opportunity to say the right thing, and he goes and says something so idiotic. What do you think? What's wrong with Spike?
Well, I don't know what's wrong with Spike, but that was one of the most delusional comments I've ever heard. But then we've heard some other people say the exact same thing. You know, you have to put this in perspective. If Spike Lee is more concerned about President Donald Trump than he is for a person that is starving his own people, if he is more concerned about Donald Trump than he is for the person that ordered the killing, really, of Otto Warmbier, the American citizen who came back in a coma and then died soon thereafter. So I don't know, you know, what Spike Lee's motivations are, but I will tell you that it's more political than it is based on reality.
All right, and you just heard Jack Brewer and I talking about kneeling. Now, he was saying that a lot of the players were praying. They were kneeling in prayer during the anthem. Does that change at all your opinion about their motivations with regard to the kneeling?
Well, I'll tell you, I was listening to that interview and I was very confused because, you know, before a game, maybe especially at University of Tennessee still to this day, you have a minister that says, offers a prayer, and he says, we will bow our heads for prayer. But when it's time for the national anthem, everyone is standing. They're at attention. If you are a veteran in Neyland Stadium, you're authorized to salute, and people are singing the Star-Spangled Banner. What was so upsetting for me when I looked at the game that was played last week Sunday between Baltimore and Jacksonville in London, England, was the fact that we had American players that took a knee during the playing of the national anthem, but when God Save the King, God Save the Queen was played, they stood up. that shows that these individuals do not understand that it was the British who was shelling Fort McHenry in the War of 1812 when Francis Scott Key saw our flag still waving at dawn's early light.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know about people that don't know about American history. That's why I got paid so well to hit the streets. But Jack was just saying, these are young guys. They're 25-year-old guys. They get a lot of money. They're overseas kneeling during our anthem and standing for the British anthem. Do you even think they understood what was going on at that moment? Do you even think they got that?
Of course. Of course not. Of course they don't. And I would say that we should take some of these young men and we should send them to Kandahar, Afghanistan, and send them some of these places in these combat zones and some of these forward operating bases and have them stand with those soldiers and get them to explain to them what the American flag means to them. You know, when the national anthem is played and people are watching football games overseas, guess what happens in a tent or in a mess hall or wherever they are? They stand at attention and they show the reverence. And that's something that we need to understand. And perhaps there should be some senior players or perhaps the NFL should talk about the right protocols that should go and happen when the national anthem is played and give them a little history lesson because obviously our education system is failing them.
It sure is, and you don't have to tell me that. All right, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Still to come, Hillary Clinton's book signing in Brooklyn got a visit from yours truly. Plus, life with Playboy icon Hugh Hefner, as told by a former Playmate and one of his legendary girlfriends. That's next. The pipe-smoking, silk pajama-wearing Playboy founder Hugh Hefner passed away this week at the age of 91. Some say Hefner was responsible for the sexual revolution with the founding of Playboy magazine and his infamous A-list only parties at the Playboy Mansion. But others say he was just a guy that loved sex. Joining me with their opinion is former Hefner girlfriend Isabella St. James and former Playmate of the Year in 2014, Kennedy Summers. So, Kennedy, you were Playmate of the Year 2014. Your interaction with Mr. Hefner was what?
Hef is always very professional with me. He was very kind, very polite. You know, I met him after he was married. I met his wife. There was never anything, you know, but business between us. He was very respectful.
Was he very involved in the photo shoots and in the production of the Playmate of the Year expose?
He's involved. He picked the photos himself, so he went through the shoots and decided like which ones would go in the magazines, and you know, he's the one who ultimately decides whether or not you become a Playmate. So he was still very involved when I became a Playmate.
So what's that process like to become a Playboy Playmate, and what do you have to go through for that?
So I sent my photos online just to like playmateeditor.com, and they contacted me and flew me to LA for a test shoot, and then they flew me back for a Playmate shoot, and then they flew me back for the Playmate of the Year shoot.
That sounds pretty easy. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Isabella, so you dated Hef for a little while, and were you living at the mansion?
Yes, I dated Hef for 2 years, and I lived at the mansion for almost exactly 2 years.
So while you were dating Hef, other girls were also dating Hef, I assume, as well?
Yes, absolutely. It was the famous era of the 7 girls, the 7 girlfriends, and that was the time when Holly Madison was there and Bridget Marquardt, and when I think Kendra Wilkinson started dating Hef right before I moved out.
Why was it 7 girlfriends at once? Was that for every day of the week?
No, I think it was just it just happened to be the lucky 7. That was his lucky number.
Lucky number 7.
Yes, exactly. And I think it brought him a lot of PR, and Hef was definitely a PR machine. So I think it just got him a lot of attention and a lot of talk around town, and I think that was part of the deal.
So how did that work when 7 girlfriends in the house? Was there a schedule? Was there date night? Was there? I know he liked his routine. Was that awkward at all?
He's very much a creature of habit. Yes, he liked his routine. But no, there was just 7 of us, and there was Hef, and was just one big happy family. There was no scheduling individual dates. Everything we did as a group. We all went out to dinner. We all went out dancing. It was just one big happy Playboy family.
So there's no downside to being one of Hef's girlfriends whatsoever?
Of course there are. You know, it's a very complicated relationship, obviously. There was a lot of drama among the girls, a lot of cattiness and jealousy. I mean, that happens with one girl in the relationship, 2. Can you imagine 7? It was pretty crazy.
No, I cannot imagine 7. Kennedy, looking back at Hugh's life, from your perspective, how do you think he'll be remembered?
Well, I'm sure he won't be forgotten. I think that the legend lives on. I think he was so much more than just a human being. He did so much for civil rights and sexual liberties and just everything. He was just a very outspoken man, and his legacy is going to live on a lot longer than probably even I'm going to live on.